Hi, my name is Henry. Today I will be doing a video demonstration on foam manipulation. I will introduce various types of tools, as well as techniques, and I'll talk about safety precaution when you're cutting foam. There's many types of foam for modeling, and each of them have specific quality and traits. So for SIAT, generally, especially for 233, you will use the blue foam. And the blue foam come in two different sizes: thick foam, as you see here, thick, and thin. You can buy these foam in many places, but in most common, you would find them in Rona, Home Depot, and your local hobby store. In terms of the cost, they cost between $10 to $30, depending on their size and thicknesses. So I would recommend students to go in a group and buy a giant sheet and divide them up for their own individual use. There's many tools that you can use for cutting foam. And generally, the basic tool you'll need is X-Acto knife, and that is essential. You'll need a large X-Acto knife, as well as a smaller X-Acto knife, depending on the technique you use. Aside from the X-Acto knife, you will also need a metal ruler for cutting straight edges, a cutting mat, and sandpaper. But what I find it useful is to have a sanding block, because sanding block is easier to hold than a piece of sandpaper. And that would be my recommendation. To cutting specific shapes, you can go out to a dollar store or Michael's to get specific templates, such as circle, square, and other shapes, to draw the shape on the foam and then start cutting it. So that's what the template will be used for. When you're cutting foam or sanding foam, there are safety precautions you have to keep in mind, such as a safety mask. Especially when you're sanding foam, there's a lot of foam particle that you will create in the process. So therefore, if those foam particles get into your lung, it will be there forever. Now I'm going to demonstrate some technique on how to cut foam. So as you can see, there are a very thick piece of foam, and I have two blades. I would recommend to use a thicker blade because the thinner blade doesn't give you enough length to cut through the foam. So the thickness of the foam determines the type of blade you'll use. Okay. Now, when you start to cut the foam, make sure you measure twice and cut once. Generally, that's my rule. I will tighten the blade, make sure it's tight. Initially, I will start making small cuts on the surface of the foam. You don't have to force your blade into the foam. That will jar the foam, and it will not give you a clean cut. And you don't have to cut through the entire foam to have a clean cut. You can cut halfway and just break it off. That will work too. So, and on the other side, you see these rough marks. That's what happens if you're going back and forth. And I don't think you want that in your model. So the part I just cut, it looks a little rough. So therefore, I will sand the surface and to make it smooth. I'll also talk about a little bit about sandpaper and the different quality of sandpaper. Usually sandpaper come in many different grades, and the grades is the coarseness of the sandpaper. And for sanding foam, generally you only need 2 grades, a micro grit and a macro grit. A micro grit is from 400 to 1000, and a macro grit is from 100 to 400. The purpose of a macro grit is for sanding a large chunk of foam away, and micro grit is more for fine finishes. So in our purpose, we'll use a micro grit sandpaper, which is 400. And of course, I will need to wear my mask. To create a smooth surface, you just have to sand the foam with a 400 grit sandpaper in one direction. If you want to create a round corner, you would have to draw in the corner. You can use a template for this, but for demonstrating purposes, I'll just draw it in. Use your X-Acto knife, cut off the excess foam. Roughly to the shape that you want. Just don't go over. And the reason why you want to cut off the excess piece is so that it will be easier for you to sand later. So it's not completely perfect, but we can make it perfect by sanding. You can see the corner is not completely round, and you can see some rough surface. Now I'm going to sand the corner to make it completely round. So I'll use my 400 grit sandpaper and just start sanding in one direction. Now it's completely round and smooth. This is the Proxon Thermo Cut foam cutter. In SIAT, there's 4 or 5 of them around the studio. You can, for student to use any time of the day. So I'm going to talk about what is a foam cutter. So essentially, a foam cutter is a tool where it contains a hot wire, and you can slice through the foam with the heated wire. It's really convenient, and I use it all the time. This is the power button. This is the temperature knob, and this is the tension knob. You use this when you want to tighten the wires. And this is for changing the temperature settings. Normally, I would leave it at 6. So the foam cutter have a metal surface, and it has guides. These guides can be turned, to different angles, and they can be adjusted to different position depending on how do you want to cut the foam. Okay. So make sure you don't touch the wire while it's on. Otherwise, you're going to burn yourself. And now I'm going to demonstrate how to do a straight cut with a foam cutter. First, I will make sure the guide is straight. There's marking on the foam cutter. I'm going to align it, tighten the knob, turn on the foam cutter, and I'm going to push the foam through the wire slowly. You don't have to force it. Otherwise, you're going to break the wire. Clean cuts. Some of you may ask me why would we need to use an X-Acto knife to cut foam instead of just use a foam cutter. The answer is simple. You have this with you all the time, but you can only use the foam cutter at school. With a foam cutter, you can cut freely in any shape that you want, just like a scroll saw. You don't have to apply so much pressure. Just lightly is fine. So what happens if you go in the studio and you discover that the wire is loose or it's broken? So the solution to that is you cut the end off, and then afterwards you insert it into the nozzle. You feed the wire through the nozzle. And flip the thermal cutter around, and you can see that the wire is sticking out. So pull the wire, give it a little pressure while you turn the tension knob and give it tension. Done. Now you have replaced the wire. Okay, that's it. So I've shown you some of the basic techniques on how to manipulate foam. And with the combination of different tools and different techniques, you can create the desirable effect and object you want with foam. So at the end, I'm going to demonstrate some simple object that I've made or my friend have made in the past. A doorknob and a flashlight. Thanks for watching.